Welcome to the Creative Penn podcast. I'm Joanna Penn, thriller author and creative entrepreneur, bringing you interviews, inspiration and information on writing craft and creative business. You can find the episode show notes, your free author blueprint and lots more at thecreativepenn.com, and that's Penn with a double N. And here's the show. Hello creatives, I'm Joanna Penn, and this is episode number 764 of the podcast, and it is Friday, the 2nd of August, 2024, as I record this. In today's show, focused on writing craft, I'm talking to Robin Finn about letting go of limiting beliefs and finding your voice on the page. Strength-based instead of critical feedback, especially at the early stages, tapping into your curiosity to make your work unique, and practicing discernment when it comes to sharing, and much more. So that's coming up in the interview section. In publishing things this week, KDP has announced identity verification. From their post on kdpcommunity.com, KDP is committed to providing legitimate authors and publishers with a trustworthy, enjoyable publishing experience. In order to further protect that experience, we're introducing identity verification for KDP. Beginning today, KDP authors and publishers may be prompted to submit a photo of their government-issued identification, which we will match against their current account information. We take privacy seriously and we handle personal information in accordance with Amazon's privacy notice and delete all identity documents after the ID verification is complete. Once the match is confirmed, authors and publishers will be able to proceed using their KDP account. So I think this is a really good development, and the key is in the first bit there, legitimate authors and publishers. So basically you are only allowed one account, and for example my account on Amazon, it's the one I've been using to purchase on Amazon for years, and I mean they know more than probably my government ID has on it, to be honest. But I think this is a good development. So it's another check to stop scammers, spammers and other people who create new profiles quickly. So if they get banned, they create another profile, mass upload, get banned, start another account. So if they check your ID, then next time I guess they can match against that. Although I guess serious scammers will have multiple IDs. Of course, there will be some issues and we would expect that this will mean some difficulties as they figure this out. But it is coming. So I thought I would mention it here, and it's certainly not something I'm worried about. In fact, I would welcome it so that I am less worried about getting my account banned. There's also an interesting piece from Kathleen Schmidt on her Publishing Confidential site on why authors need platforms. Now, Kathleen works with mainly traditional publishing, so I always enjoy getting an insight from that side of the business. She gives multiple reasons why authors need a platform, and I'll just pick a couple of them because it's quite a long article. It's very good. She says, you can't depend on publicity. Publicity is always a crapshoot, even more so for the average author. That doesn't mean it won't happen, but it does mean that authors genuinely need to be in the driver's seat for promoting their books. Another point she makes is readers want to know you. She says, connecting with your readers is important because they are more likely to buy your book if you do. This is absolutely true. This is the 1,000 True Fans idea from Kevin Kelly, and that if you have 1,000 people who care enough about you to give you some money now and then, you can make a living. It might not be like $1 bazillion, but you can make a living. And so thank you. It's why Kickstarter's great and Patreon is great. And thanks to everyone who's supporting me there and who's backed my campaigns or is in the community. But I would change this. So she said, readers want to know you. I would change this to some readers want to know you. I was thinking about it from my perspective as a reader. I read a ton of books where I don't know and I don't care about the author. But I have a handful who are one-click buys because actually, they're one-click buys and I don't need to hear from them. I follow them in other ways and I don't need to hear from them regularly, but I care about enough to want to buy their book, mainly because their book is good though. So I think this definitely has gradation. We're not looking to say 100% of people who buy your books actually care about you as a person. It's not that. It's a certain number do, and that's a good start. And then, of course, there's the wider reach. Also, Kathleen says, your publisher needs you to have a platform. She says, too many authors take a backseat to book promotion and become disappointed when things don't happen. And of course, this is true for indies. I still hear from authors who don't want to do book marketing, but are also disappointed when they don't sell any books or when they get a publishing deal and they still don't necessarily sell any books because, as Kathleen says, your publisher wants you to do marketing. So lots more in there and definitely worth the read. And in case you don't know, your author platform can be many things. The core of it would be your email list, your social media following, although the number of buyers does not match the number of followers. It's usually a fraction of followers. It could also include speaking, podcasts like this, in-person events. All the ways you can connect with readers is your platform. And then I also wanted to mention the new report from K-Lytics. As I know this will be popular, it is the new romance report. And if you don't know K-Lytics, essentially Alex breaks down, he's a data guy and we've done webinars before in the past, but Alex essentially breaks down the 106 subcategories of romance. I could not name 106 subcategories of romance, to be fair, and helps you identify niches where you might want to write. There are 2 research reports and a video seminar. It includes keywords, top-selling covers so you can model them, and then data around KU versus wide, series versus standalone, and much more analysis. And yes, I'm an affiliate. You can get the report at thecreativepenn.com/romance24. That's thecreativepenn.com/romance24, or go along to klytics.com. And then in AI things this week, there has been a ton of stuff going on in the AI world, but I don't share everything here. I just choose the most pertinent thing for us. And this is the biggest thing this week. Canva has bought Leonardo, which is an AI image generator. And from their article about it, links in the show notes as ever, we're thrilled to announce our acquisition of generative AI platform Leonardo as we double down on building and scaling the world's best visual AI. So they'll be incorporating Leonardo into the tools on Canva, which many authors already use, including me. I've used it for years. I think it's amazing for social media, blog images, book covers. They have loads of templates. I even now have started using it for like a nice invoice template. There's loads of business things. They have slide decks. I've done my book trailers on there. There's TikTok things and Instagram and all kinds of stuff. It's really, really good. And I'm sure many of you have used their Magic Studio tools, which are now sort of incorporated. And they say, since Magic Studio launched, it has been used more than 7 billion times. We've seen a 40% increase in monthly users this year alone, leveraging AI tools from everything from summarizing documents to creating images and turning brainstorm whiteboards into fully fledged presentations. So, of course, while I work with Jane Dixon Smith, my book cover designer for most of my books and certainly all my print books, all of which now include AI image elements. All my books from the last probably 18 months have elements of AI in them. And of course, I always disclose that, have always done. I have also used Canva ebook templates for a couple of short story covers. So doing a short story, you don't make a ton of money from a short story initially. It can do very well in the multiple ways that you can license it. But paying Jane the full price for just an ebook and audiobook cover, sometimes I haven't done that. So for Beneath the Zoo, which is a short story, I made that with DALL-E and then I imported it into a Canva ebook template and then resized that and they have like automatic resize into all these different things. And so I'm really interested in how Leonardo will integrate particularly with that. So I thought you'd want to know about that. Exciting times as ever. So in personal news, I am still in first draft of the Vineyard book, which is my folk horror novel. And I did finish also watching the 1970s version of The Wicker Man, which is just old school brilliant. So I'm going to have some callbacks to that. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be my next Kickstarter because I'm just way too excited about designing things. And in fact, I'm already playing with Midjourney around designs for inside the book as well as the cover. I might even try and time it over Samhain for all you pagan pagans out there, or Halloween, if that is your preferred festival, 31st of October. Now, I also did something very cool with Claude this week. I wanted to tell you in case you're writing fiction and you want this kind of thing. So in the story, the main character finds this old viticulture grimoire in the library of the manor house in the vineyard, and the text kind of blends viticulture, which is about wine and vineyards, and biodynamics and pagan mythology and superstition and blood rituals and things. So it's this really cool book, which I'm not creating that book. That's not the book, but she finds that book. And so then I decided I really wanted to put some sort of quotes from the book as sort of interstitials with some other design elements in at least the special edition, maybe the other editions. So I went on Claude.ai and I wanted it to imagine some quotes, because of course you want that slightly old language. So it knows the book because I've been working with it. I said I want to revisit the ancient book Viticulture and the Old Ways, a grimoire. I'd like to include quotes from the book as interstitials in the story, like section headers, along with images of vines in different seasons. So I'm really setting the stage there. Please can you make up 9 quotes, 3 for each of the pagan festivals. They should reflect accurate aspects of viticulture, but also have an edge of folk horror. They should be 2 or 3 lines maximum each. And it came up with the 9, and it was just like, well, if you don't know, the 3 festivals are Beltane, Lammas and Samhain, and there are different ways of pronouncing these words, but there you go. Then I asked it to do 9 more, and then I asked it to do 9 more, and each time I said, no, go deeper into folk horror, go deeper into viticulture, go deeper into this. By the 3rd try, I was super happy, and I've got a whole load to work with. I'm probably going to mix and match various bits of it, but I just love this idea. And of course, I don't even know if I could have done that, because you have to replicate a sort of old school way of writing. And if you've seen the old almanacs for various farming things, then you'll know what I'm going for. And yeah, I wanted to share that prompt because it's been so much fun. I also did the discovery writing webinars last weekend for the Kickstarter. So the Kickstarter is done. If you haven't received your print books by the middle of August, do email me, joanna@thecreativepenn.com. I really enjoyed the discovery writing webinars. They were 2-hour sessions, and we did 90 minutes with writing and talking, and then we did a Q&A on other things. So it's always great to write with people. I did some writing. I also demoed Claude as different ways to use it in discovery writing. So that was really fun, and I probably will use the same idea in the next Kickstarter, because people just really found it useful. Also, this is a new thing that I haven't done for a long time. I used to do more writing retreats, but I have not done one for ages. So you can join me and Orna Ross for a weekend writing retreat just outside Dublin in Ireland. We have some places left as I record this. It is the weekend of 11th to the 13th of April 2025. Orna is selling this through her Kickstarter, so this is her retreat, and I'll be teaching a session and I'll be there. The Kickstarter finishes on August the 12th. There might be a wait list, of course, so check out the details at thecreativepenn.com/retreat25. And Orna's Kickstarter, links in the show notes. Most listeners will already know Orna Ross, as we do a lot together, including the Self-Publishing Advice podcast every few months now. She's an award-winning historical fiction author, a poet, also writes non-fiction, and is the founder of the Alliance of Independent Authors. Orna is also one of my best friends, and we've run a lot of events together over the years. But this is our first multi-day retreat. We've always talked about doing one. So we'll see. It'll be fun. There'll be writing sessions. There's also some hanging out time, a chance to ask all your questions, and I'll do a shadow writing session. But yes, Orna is in charge and running it. So for any practical questions, please ask her. This is a redirect link, thecreativepenn.com/retreat25. I haven't been to Dublin since the 90s, so I'm also going to have probably a couple of days there before going. So I'm excited about that. Thanks for your emails and comments and photos this week. On Anna's interview, Clarice Smythe says, love this episode. It combines some of my favourite subjects of history, research, writing, mystery, murder, marketing and resilience. Yes, we covered a lot in that episode with Anna last week. Ryan said, listening to your latest episode in the reading room of the Boston Main Library, and sent an amazing picture of the beautiful vaulted ceiling and those green over-desk lamps. Thanks, Ryan. Suzanne on X said, I really enjoy the podcast. It inspired me to set one up myself. And I bought your book on audio. We've done 18 episodes, have 32,000 listens. Not bad for 2 aging landlords. I listened to your podcast in Kent, the Garden of England. Now, I love that. And some people say, oh, it's too late to do a podcast. It certainly is not. It really is not. In the same way, it's not too late to write a book. It's not too late to set up a new website. It's not too late to get on whatever platform. Things develop. But yeah, I love this. Thanks, Suzanne. Lots of photos this week. Henrik sent a picture of himself painting, renovating our apartment for sale in Bergen, Norway, and heading to Shanghai next, which is fascinating. CJ Edmonds listening on the drive home in Manila. And John sent a beautiful photo of Lake Superior early morning, taken from the porch of a lakeside rental. Looked beautiful, this lovely still lake. I think I'd be very happy sitting there. Okay, you can leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, message me on X at thecreativepenn, or email me and send me pictures of where you're listening, Joanna at thecreativepenn.com. I love to hear from you. It makes this more of a conversation. So today's show is sponsored by Findaway Voices by Spotify, the platform for independent authors who want to unlock the world's largest audiobook platforms. With no upfront costs, you can distribute your audiobooks globally to nearly 40 retailers and library services, including Spotify, Audible, Apple Books, Google Play, and more. Findaway Voices also gives you total control over your retail and library pricing, and you keep 100% of your royalties on Spotify and 80% everywhere else. I've personally been using Findaway Voices by Spotify for years now to publish my audiobooks widely. And every single one of my audiobooks goes through Findaway Voices now, both full-length fiction and non-fiction, as well as novellas and short stories. I'm currently uploading files for Spear of Destiny, which will be available everywhere from 1st of September. I love how easy it is to upload my audiobook files, choose distribution platforms, and set my pricing, as well as take advantage of promotional pricing opportunities on Spotify, Apple, and Chirp Books. I also love the reporting dashboard. It really is good, where I can see sales and library borrows, royalty reports and payments, as well as aggregated demographic data about Spotify Premium listeners. And yeah, I really do love that report. It's very cool. You can download it and it tells you the gender, it tells you age group, it tells you how much people have listened to. That really is fascinating. So take your audiobook everywhere to earn everywhere with Findaway Voices by Spotify. Go to findawayvoices.com/pen, Penn, to publish your next audiobook project. That's findawayvoices.com/pen. So this type of corporate sponsorship pays for the hosting, transcription and editing, but my time in creating the show is sponsored by my community at patreon.com/thecreativepenn. Thanks to the 10 new patrons who've joined this week, and thanks to everyone who's been supporting for months and years. If you join the community, you get access to all my backlist videos and audio covering topics on creativity and writing craft, mindset, business, marketing, AI, and of course my solo episodes, which are essentially a solo show a month. This week, as this goes out, I'll be doing live office hours for the first time. And if this is popular, I'll do more. So I can do demos and ask and answer patron questions live. And of course, the recording will go out to patrons. So that's on top of the audio Q&A. So you're going to get lots more useful content. The Patreon is a monthly subscription, the equivalent of buying me a black coffee a month, or a couple of coffees if you're feeling generous. And you get access to everything, all the backlist content. So if you get value from the show and you want more, come on over and join us at patreon.com, patreon.com/thecreativepenn. Right, let's get into the interview. Robin Finn is an award-winning writer, teacher and coach, and the author of Heart, Soul, Pen. Find your voice on the page and in your life. So welcome to the show, Robin.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you today. So first up, tell us a bit more about you and how you got into writing and publishing.
Well, my story's a little meandering. I really was a writer when I was a child, but I sort of tucked that away for decades. And then years later, after I became a mom, I had a child with, one of my kids has severe hyperactivity, and it made parenting so difficult and excruciating, particularly the judgment that I got from all the other parents, that I ultimately ended up writing as a means of healing. And I wrote originally a lot of personal essay about parenting a child with special needs. And that was really the beginning of my writing career. During the time when I was really actively parenting and really struggling, I ended up going back to school and getting a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And spiritual psychology is a program where you really connect to what is your purpose. And one of the things that came out of that program for me is I'm a writer. So I started to write about parenting a child with special needs, and I was really scared. I had a lot of shame and a lot of judgment about what I was writing. But I went to a conference and I met some writers, and I decided I'm going to send out one of my essays. And to my shock, it was accepted. And when I saw it online, I was so shocked and scared. But what happened from that point was I was flooded with emails from other parents, really, Joe, from all over the world, from Australia and Japan, thanking me for writing this piece and telling me they were having a similar experience. And that connecting with others and realizing how healing writing can be, not just for myself, but for other people, really spurred me on to publish my work. And then from there, it was really, again, like I was reached out to by so many women asking me about writing and about how they also were having experiences they wanted to write about. So I sort of blended my background in public health, spiritual psychology, and writing, and I created this program called Heart, Soul, Penn for women writers to find their voice. And I taught this program for many years, and then ultimately it became the book.
That's so lovely of you to share those feelings. It really strikes me, you've talked there, even we've only been on the phone like 3 minutes, and you've used the words judgment, shame, scared, shocked. These are all really emotional words to use about writing. And I know there's people listening. I've certainly felt it myself. I wrote a book last year. Well, it was written over a long time. I published it last year called Writing the Shadow, which is based on the Jungian idea of shadow. And I did cut some things out of that book because of some of those things you're talking about. So if people listening feel the same thing, they feel that fear of judgment, they feel that shame, how did you get past those things in order to share that first essay, like that first step before you got the feedback? How did you do that?
Well, it's a really good question, because when I was writing the book, Heart, Soul, Penn, I had been teaching Heart, Soul, Penn for years, but I literally didn't know what it was I was teaching. It's such an intuitive process that I had to be like, okay, wait, how can I make into a system what I'm doing? And it's interesting you bring this up, because the first step of the book is called Revise and Release Limiting Beliefs. That's step one. And I literally take you through how I did that with parenting and how it really applied to writing. This idea of writing down what I believed about myself as a mother, that was the despair that brought me to spiritual psychology school, was this idea that I was a failure as a mother because I couldn't fix my son and I couldn't fix my family and make them into this perfect fantasy family. And I had to go through this entire process of writing down what my beliefs were about myself, and then really asking myself, do I even believe my beliefs? And also asking myself, do these beliefs support me having a joyful, peaceful parenting life? And they really did not. And then being willing to rewrite the beliefs and then repeat them every day until eventually, over time, they became my new belief system. And when I started writing, I literally went back to that very same process, and I outline it in the book. But it is a step-by-step process of being willing to start with examining, what do you believe about writing and about worthiness and about your own voice, and being willing to write it down and look at it. And I can tell you that a lot of the things I believed about my own writing and my own voice were just dumb, just silly. I didn't even believe my own beliefs, but they were there inside of me. And then being willing to review them and ask myself, do these beliefs, if I believe I don't have anything important to say, for example, does that support my goal of writing Not really. So am I willing to let that go and replace it with a different belief? For example, what I have to say is helpful to myself and to others. Writing is a part of who I am. My message is important. Replacing it with beliefs that support my goals, and then being willing to look at these new beliefs every day, maybe multiple times a day, until they really become my new belief system. And I think for all writers and creatives to be willing to do that step before pen ever goes to paper is so powerful and life-changing. I truly believe that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a very difficult thing to do, though. I mean, you do open the book with something that resonated with me. You said, and this is a quote from the book, "The messages we receive as kids get lodged inside of us and become lifelong limiting beliefs that impact how we live, work, write, create, show up in our lives and relate to others and ourselves." And it's so interesting because I actually put my experience of school in that book, Writing the Shadow, where a teacher basically told me that I couldn't write that kind of thing, that it was too dark, that it was like a nightmare and I shouldn't write that. I should write something nice. And write something nice has sort of become something I resist now. I write dark fiction, for example. But it's so interesting. It took me many, many decades to uncover that. So I guess I'm asking, are these limiting beliefs layers? So we uncover almost something that might be obvious, but it takes a while to get down to the lower limiting beliefs.
Yes. And I mean, I really love what you're sharing. And I can't tell you how many students come to my classes, how many writers with stories like that. And I talk about in the book, how women often feel like my writing has to be pretty. My writing has to be good. My writing has to be sunshine and roses, like what you're saying. And these are not true. And these are the types of beliefs that get stuck inside. And it's very difficult to write when we hold these beliefs. It's not impossible, but I call it writing through mud. You can do it, but it's so arduous. And isn't it more fun to write with flow, to just have the words fall out? Well, if we want to have that kind of flow, we have to be willing to excavate at least a little bit these limiting beliefs. To your point, they are very layered, but we got to start somewhere. In the book, I don't dive into the deepest layers, but I start with how can we look at just the top layer of what do we believe about our voice and our writing and our worthiness, and start to loosen that up a little bit and create beliefs that really support us in our writing journey. And that's 9/10 of getting rid of the barriers to writing, is to let go of these beliefs that what you have to say is too dark, isn't important, is wrong in some way, is shameful. None of that is true.
Yeah, and another thing you raise, I guess this is related to you mentioned purpose before, and writing is a purpose, but many of us think our work is just pointless, or maybe it's boring, or it's been said before, or maybe frivolous in a world where we should be writing something very important, something political or about health, or something where it's more important than a fictional story. I mean, sometimes I feel that. And you talk about this myth of the mundane in the book, which I like. So how can we value our writing, whatever that turns out to be?
I think that's a really beautiful question. And one of the things that I do is I offer lots of opportunities to write in community, whether you take a writing class, a course, a workshop, but writing in community, and in a community that particularly offers strength-based feedback and not critique, is so empowering for the writer to see how deeply resonant their words are. It is not true that your daily life is not important. So much of what life is about, the daily aspects of living, and they're metaphors for so much more. And so this idea that, writing about my life because I didn't climb Mount Everest isn't important is, again, that's just a limiting belief, and it's not true. And you could write something very deep about, I had a woman once who wrote about how she had to make chicken and rice every single night for dinner because her kids only ate chicken and rice. And when she read the piece, people teared up because it wasn't really about writing, about cooking chicken and rice. It's about someone who loved to cook as an art and what a prison it felt like to have to make the same meal over and over again, and about wanting to be liberated. And it was about so much, but I think the writer would have judged it as not important if they weren't in an environment where they were able to hear from other writers how resonant their story was. So I do think writing in community, where you get an opportunity to hear comments on your work that focus on the strengths and the resonance of your work, really helps a writer see how powerful their words are.
Yeah, and this is obviously one of the keys to good writing, is being very specific. Like you mentioned there, the chicken and rice. And in my head, I could kind of see that woman reading this and see the sort of bland food she was putting out there and writing about that specific situation. As you said, the other people, the readers and the listeners, will bring their own meaning to that. I was thinking it was a form of sacrifice that she was doing this for her family. And that, again, it's a universal feeling. So I love how you explain that. And this sort of writing your specific things, other people will turn that into their own message, right?
Other people will turn it into their own message, and it will reach the people for whom that message is so deeply meaningful. And the other thing is the writer doesn't see the value. So letting other people respond to this piece about chicken and rice saying, oh my God, motherhood has also felt for me like a prison, or the repetition is so difficult, or whatever it is that it brings up for other people. It helps the writer understand that, wow, what I have to say is important and very layered, and to judge it as dumb or mundane and then throw away my paper, you're denying everybody the power of your words.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago, strengths-based feedback, and all writers have this inner critic and we tear ourselves apart. We also have editors and readers and reviewers who also tear our work apart. So we often come from a negative feedback point of view. So could you explain strengths-based feedback and how we might put that into practice?
As a teacher and a workshop facilitator, it's really my deepest belief that writers get critical feedback way too early. And I strongly am opposed to that. I think there is a place for critical feedback, but it's much, much later in the writing process than most writers. They get excited and then they get feedback. And what happens is the critical feedback really ruins the joy of expression. It confuses us and it disconnects us from that thread that's just starting that we're just getting of the story. So I really, really caution writers to not receive critical feedback early on in the work. Strength-based feedback really has to do with sharing with the writer what is working in the piece, what is resonant about the piece, what you notice about the piece, and where you might have questions. And I have a little acronym following the TIDES at the TIDES. And that's where you just focus on the themes, images, details, emotions, and structure of a piece. So for example, someone might read the piece about the chicken and rice, and a fellow writer might say, the images were so clear to me. I could see the kids sitting at the table. I love the detail about the type of rice she used, or the emotions of how weighty this was for the writer. I really felt the emotions. So we share what we notice about the tides, and we don't get into the critique. And I think that's really important, because the place for critique, in my opinion, is much, much later in the writing process.
That's really interesting. You talk about writing community. I never do that. I have never been in a writing group because I like being on my own. But
yes.
Also, I almost don't trust, as you say, I feel too vulnerable. And I don't trust that people in a writing group, other writers, understand what you're talking about, for example. And that actually, as writers, we're not normal readers. We instinctively do criticize because we've read so much, or we've read across multiple genres. And often people bring, they might say to a romance writer, oh, that is too romantic. Why isn't it more literary, or whatever? There'll be people listening who are in writers groups, and they would love their writers group to kind of follow this process. You talk about it in the book, obviously, but how can we kind of shift that if people are in groups or maybe have to find other groups, basically?
Well, one thing I'd say is I have a whole section in the book devoted to strength-based feedback, following the tides, and I go through in detail how to do it. And of course, it's never too late. If you're in a writing group and you want to try working with strength-based feedback, try looking at the tides of the work, you can certainly, step by step, you'll learn how to do it in the book. The other thing is just a quick litmus test for any writer, and I say this to all of my students who I work with. If you're in a writing group and it makes you want to write less, it's not a good group. And if your writing group makes you want to write more, if your writing group makes you feel enthusiastic about writing, great. But if you are in a writing group that makes you feel bad, want to write less, or hang up your pen, then that's just not a good group for you. And I just can't underscore enough how strongly I believe in that. Everyone has a creative voice. People who are drawn to writing because they're writers. And you need to put yourself, and this is your responsibility to take care of your creative heart, to put yourself in a situation where you are supported and nurtured by the other writers you're working with. And if that is not the case, then that is not a group that I would recommend for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, okay, assuming I'm in a group like that now, so say I'm the chicken and rice lady, but the reality is maybe 80% of what I've written is not great. But what the feedback you've given me on the tides principle, as the writer, should I then focus on strengthening the positive side of things, and just ignore fixing up anything people didn't mention? Or do I just kind of leave that and move on? So I guess I'm asking that the response of me, the writer, to that kind of feedback.
Yes. Well, I think when you read your piece and you get notes and people share with you the themes that really resonated, the images, the details, there's also something called trigger lines, where I believe in a piece of writing, there are lines that trigger deeper stories. And sometimes that will be reflected to the writer too. Like, wow, that line, I never get what I want. That was so deep. I'd love to know more about that. And I might say to the writer, circle that line. There's more there for you to explore. So when you're done reading your piece, you'll have notes about what really resonated, where people were really moved, what lines maybe have more story. And you'll leave class knowing, like, I think there's a whole nother story hidden in here that I want. And I may feel very enthusiastic about working on that. So it's not really a matter of like nothing else that wasn't mentioned matters. It's really just an arrow pointing the writer into, how can I go deeper into this story? How can I excavate further into really getting into the story that wants to be told?
And of course, if people are doing this on their own, I mean, like something I do is I'll print it out on paper, and then I might find something and highlight that or underline something where I feel that in my own writing. But it strikes me that you must have a very keen ability to listen, both to the words and to the meaning beneath the words. And I'd love to know if that's something that you've learned how to do. Is that something you've particularly focused on, or is that something you think you've always had?
Oh, wow. No one's ever asked me that question before. I bring my whole self to the listening process. And I've been doing this now for a long time. I have honed a lot of these skills in the spiritual psychology realm of really listening, not just to the words, but to the energy behind the words. And I'm also, when you focus your attention on these ideas of what resonates for you, it just becomes very clear. And it's a process for sure you can do on your own. I mean, not everybody's going to be in a writing group, but I think that as you, the writer, start to look at your work and I talk about like a kaleidoscope, you shift the lens. So instead of looking to criticize your work, you're asking yourself, what themes or images, details, emotions, or the structure, what do I notice about my work? How can I be curious about my work? What can I discover from my work? Instead of looking to criticize your work, you can develop these skills yourself. And it is definitely, to your point, as the writer, you can feel as you reread your work, you can feel the lines that are kind of jumping off the page that want to be double clicked on. There's more story behind them. You can feel it, and you can hone your own skills as you work with this idea of stopping the criticizing, stopping the judgment, stop the constant, it's mundane, it's not good enough, and shift into, I am going to be curious about what I have to say and where there might be more story for me. And you're going to, and I believe for each writer, they'll start to have a different relationship with their own work, and it will start to flow more, and it will become more clear what they really want to write about.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about feeling the lines and what resonates for you and curiosity. I talk about these things as well. And of course, in the book, you talk about finding your voice, but it's such a nebulous concept for new writers in particular, who might not have, don't have creative confidence and are always second guessing. So how do people tap into that curiosity? How can they try and feel the lines if they're listening to you going, well, I just don't know what that is?
Well, I guess what I'd say is you could get the book and go through the steps. One of them is using a timer, writing faster than you think, writing to a timer. You can even start setting your timer. If you're a new writer, set your timer for 3 minutes or 5 minutes and write as quickly as possible. The purpose of this is to write faster than you're thinking so that the words are emerging. You're not making them up in your head and putting them on paper. They're actually emerging from a deeper place. And as you do that, time after time, you start to reread your writing and see the themes that just naturally emerge. So if you're trying to find your voice, I'd say one easy way is to start with a regular writing practice where you set a timer, and it could be as little as 3 or 5 minutes a few times a week, and just freely write. Have an air of curiosity about what comes forward and start to see what emerges naturally. What is your material? What you are concerned about, what matters to you will naturally emerge if you get out of the way and allow it.
What do you think about dictating as a process for that kind of free writing?
Well, I just came back from a wonderful workshop that I did in the Berkshires, and the students there were all seniors, over 70. And it was a wonderful experience. But the people, one woman in particular couldn't type because she had a disability. And so she would dictate. She was a poet. And I thought it worked out for her really beautifully. So I think it really depends on where you're most comfortable. If you're just starting out, I would say start with paper and pen. That whole tactile experience is so powerful. If you can't use paper and pen, you can type. If you can't type, you can dictate. Whatever works for you is what you should do. You should not allow a barrier to stop you from writing if you feel like you really want to express yourself that way. So I think if dictating is what works best for you, then go for it.
Yeah, I do write in my journal for some things, but I never really write finished sentences. I type my finished sentences, but my journals are full of fragments and just bits and bobs and ideas and quotes. And there's different times to do different things, but the core is in there somewhere.
And I agree with you. I mean, generally speaking, I type on a laptop when I'm writing a book or I have the thread of an essay, I'm on the laptop. But I have periods of my own time where I'm I don't know what I want to write about. I've got nothing. So that's when I'll get out my trusty pen and my paper, and I just start writing pen and paper. And that is the best way for me to try to connect to my own voice, is through pen and paper. And once I have the spark, then it's flooding and I really want to get all these words down, I switch to my laptop. So to your point, I think there's different times in the creative process where different tools serve us best. But I'd say for new writers who are looking for their voice, looking for an idea, sometimes paper and pen is actually the most powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you do say your step 4 in your process is write faster than you think. I cannot write faster than I think by hand anymore, but I am really fast at typing. When I want to get into a flow state, I can't really do it by hand, but I can do it typing.
But well, when I'm working with new writers and they're doing that step and they're done, the timer goes off and they shake their hand out. My hand hurts. I say to them, you actually did a beautiful job following the assignment, because it's true. Your hand literally can hurt from just writing as fast as you can. And for you may be at the place where you can't and you just have to type. And I get into that state sometimes too, where I just have to type. But I really think the whole purpose of the book is to respect yourself as the expert of your creative process. So like my best advice would be follow your own guidance. If you feel that you need to type, trust that you know best for you and type. If you feel you need to dictate, then dictate. But the whole purpose of Heart Soul Pen is for you, the writer, to trust that you are actually the expert of your creative process. And that if you allow yourself to come forward as a writer and listen to your own guidance, you'll be amazed where it will take you. The steps in the book are really just me trying to break it down in ways that are easy to follow for each person to come to the awareness that they really are the expert of their own creative process.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like timed writing, I think, is magic. I also had my first sort of breakthrough at one of the many writing workshops I took in the early days before I wrote anything. Really, I would read all the books and I'd go to all the talks, and then someone like you basically said, right, before I start my talk, we're all going to write together 3 minutes. And the prompt was something like, it was at that moment I knew. I still remember what I wrote. I won't go into it, but it was like, at that moment I knew. And I immediately was like, oh, what we're meant to write. And what is so incredible is that if you do force yourself, like you say, a timer for 3 minutes can change your life, because when you look at what you've written, you realize that you can do it. And that's almost the first step, isn't it, for sort of trusting what will come out if you then do another 3 minutes or another hour or whatever.
And I agree with you. I do feel that timed writing is magic. And the other thing that I do is I choose prompts that are really random. And my favorite way to get prompts is I have each writer choose their own prompt. And it could be something like, look around and name the first 3 things your eye falls on. Again, I believe that your eye falls on the first 3 things that speak to you personally, not the 3 things I'm giving you, but the 3 things you notice in your experience. And then you have to put those in your writing. And so that forces our brain to have to make all these weird connections. How am I going to get blue stapler, yellow pen, and lipstick into my writing? Those are the first 3 things I saw. And so our brain makes all these strange connections. And then when people read their writing, it is very magical. There's something so authentic about it when you stop trying to create it and just allow it to emerge.
And those connections, the connections that you make, even given that same prompt, you and me and everyone listening, we could all write something, and everyone's will be different because of who they are, where they're brought up, their background, their culture, their religion, like all of this stuff. So that's, I guess, why I always say to people, look, don't worry about writing another love story, everyone has their love story, and everyone's is different. And I mean, you must have seen this. How many variations on a prompt must you get in your workshop?
It's incredible. And in the book, every chapter starts with a paragraph written by a different writer to the prompt, I remember. So there's 10 chapters. So there's 10 little mini pieces of writing. They're all 5 minutes and they all start with I remember. And as you read them, you can see how wildly different they are. And then at the end, I take you through each one of those chapter openers, and we follow the tides, and I talk about the themes, the images, the details, etc., and each piece and how wildly different they are. And that's where I believe we all have unlimited creativity, and we all have so much to say that's unique. And to your point, often writers will say to me, well, I don't think I should write my love story because there's so many love stories already written. And I just feel like that, again, that's a limiting belief, because your love story in your voice hasn't been written. No one can write that but you. So it's not like you have to write something that's never been written before, because your story in your unique voice is 100% new.
And then over time, that's what readers come back for. I actually had a review this week. I wrote a short story. It's called De-Extinction of the Nephilim. And it is a kind of, it's like a techno thriller with archaeological and religious elements. So it doesn't really fit in a genre. But someone said, I don't really read short stories, but I read this and I can see the strands of J.F. Penn's voice in this story. And it just thrilled me because I have had points of thinking, I've written this before. I've written about Nephilim before. I've written about angels before. I've written about this trope or this, but that's because that's what I love. And actually that's what the readers come for because they love them too. Like there's a lot of crypts and religious relics and like those are the things that come out in my themes. And so I guess it's also about the confidence you can still double down on those things even if you've written about them before. It will still be in a slightly different way next time.
Absolutely. And I hear that a lot. I'm always writing about blank. Someone will tell me, I'm just writing about divorce over and over again. I don't want to keep writing about divorce. Well, you're going to write about divorce until you're done writing about divorce. And that might be a theme for you throughout your life, or it may just be a theme for now. But we are going to write about the things that are of interest to us for as long as they're of interest to us. And this idea that there's a deadline, like, well, I've written about crypts, so now I have to write about something else. But if that's what turns you on and that's what's of interest to you, that's going to keep coming up. And instead of acting like it's a bad thing, we could just embrace it.
Yeah. And I think I got to that point and just went, you know what? This is what I love and this is what my readers love and they will come back for this. So that's interesting. But I do want to, as we carry on in the book, also you had a really interesting bit about putting yourself out there. So this is a quote from the book. Discernment is the space between writing and sharing, where you stop and consider the next steps, the process by which your thinking mind considers the possible outcomes of sharing your work and makes decisions about privacy, timing, and consequences. And this is so important because everything you've said so far very much underscores the need to share personal things in our writing. So how do we do this? Because people are very scared to put themselves out there in a world where social media can be hell. Basically,
yes.
You talk about judgment. I mean, there's a lot of it.
Well, so that's why I feel like really understanding discernment is really important. So there's writing, then there's discernment, then there's sharing. And so when you're in the writing phase and you want to be able to write freely, whether that means if you're writing nonfiction, you want to write about family matters or things that have actually happened in your life, or maybe it's fiction and you're writing sex scenes or you're writing whatever it is that you want to write. And you have to allow yourself the free rein to write anything. And I think it's really important that writers understand that just because you write it doesn't mean you're going to share it. We're going to move into that space between writing and sharing where we're going to now use our discernment to decide what we're going to do with our work. But when we write, and while we're writing, we're trying to edit out things that we don't want to share, we really screw up the process. So it's really important to understand writing is that process that you and you alone do, and you can be fully free to write whatever it is that you want. And then we go into discernment. Should I share this? Will my family get mad at me? Is this actually private material? Are there things that I want to edit out of this? No, I don't want to share it. Maybe I only want to share it with certain people, but not widely. Maybe I want to share the whole thing and I'm ready to throw a bomb in my life. These are questions that are very personal to each writer. How much of what I have now written am I going to share? Maybe I'm going to fictionalize it. I mean, there's lots of questions about, is this the time? Is it private? What will these consequences be? This is a thinking process that we have to go through after we're done free writing and giving ourselves full liberation to write whatever we want. We then have to go into the thinking part and ask ourselves, how do I feel about sharing this piece and what do I want to make? What do I want to decide to do? And then after we make those decisions, we get into the sharing. So I think it's really important to understand just because you wrote it doesn't mean you're sharing it. Because if you don't distinguish those two phases, if you don't distinguish them, you can end up trying to edit yourself as you write. And I find that never works.
Yeah, definitely. I have struggled with that, as I said, in the Writing the Shadow. And I had a memoir on pilgrimage where I mentioned menopause. And at the time I was like, do I really want to put this in a book? But I needed to write about it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write about it. And in the end, I put a little bit, not too much, but it was something that really came up for me. Obviously, there's a lot of judgment in midlife, as you know. But I did want to ask you specifically about what you have done with that. Is it about the time that's passed? Because you started this interview talking about the difficulties in parenting your son. So you're admitting something there that perhaps has had an impact in your family. So how did you get to that point of sharing?
Well, I guess I'd say I never wrote my son's experience because I'm not capable of doing that. I wrote my experience as a parent, but I always offered for my own children anytime that they appeared in my writing. And my first love is personal essay. So I do write and have written a lot about my family. Any child of mine that appears in my writing is always given the opportunity to read the essay and let me know if they don't want any part of it to be shared. That's my decision as a mother, that I would never want to write anything that any child of mine would interpret as betraying their confidence. So I always give my children the opportunity to read anything. And I still write about, like to your point, midlife and empty nesting and different things that have happened with my young adult kids. And so anytime they appear in my work, they're always given the opportunity to read it. And if they have notes about it, I would certainly take their words. That's most important to me. Number one is that I would never betray their confidence. Having said that, because I'm a writer, my children know that I'm going to write about our lives. And I literally have never had any of them ever ask me to change anything. I mean, that's just me and my family, but that is a part of discernment where for me, if I'm writing something personal about my experience parenting and one of my kids appears and I want them to have the opportunity to read it, that's a decision I've made. And so I do that before I share. That's part of like, I write anything I want, but then I do take that time to share it with them because their confidence is important to me. So that's one of the things I do. Not everybody who writes personal essay wants to share every single thing they write about. And I think you mentioned, Joanna, that in your book, there were things you took out, maybe not just about menopause, but just other things. And I think that's important where we then look at our work and decide like, this may be too private for me. Once it's out there, it's out there. So you do have to really ask yourself those questions. I feel that personally, sharing the struggles I went through as a mom was so liberating, helped me connect so much with others. I believe it was in service for both me and other people. But these are decisions that I think are really individual to each person.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, there were things I'd written about people who are still alive, who I love, and who I just decided that I didn't need to put that stuff in for the book to still serve the purpose that I wanted it to serve. I think that's the other thing. You obviously have helped so many people with some of the words you've written around your parenting, and that's helped other parents. And I felt with my book that I had served the purpose of the book with what I wanted to put out, and I didn't need the things that I had to potentially question. So yeah, everyone has to come up, as you say, the discernment is a personal thing. But yeah, your words can certainly change other people. I do have one final question just before we finish. We're almost out of time. But I wanted to come back to your live events. You've mentioned community. You work with groups of writers. And what is the benefit of being physically in the same space with writers? And you might feel really vulnerable. But in this world of Zoom, you and I are we're on Riverside, but the online things that we do so much. What are the benefits of in-person writing?
Having the opportunity to share your work and know that the response to your work will be nurturing, because that is I create a safe space, so it is always nurturing. So having the opportunity to share your work live and receive feedback that is strength-based is I would say, transformational for the writer. You are seen, heard, and understood by other people, and you have the chance to hear what resonates for them about your work. I'm not sure there's anything more inspiring for the writer. I mean, anytime that people come together live and write and share together in a framework that's strength-based, I would say people leave exhilarated because it's this opportunity to take off our mask and really be seen. And I just can't say enough how much inspiration I feel like writers come away with. They come away with a feeling of my work matters and I'm ready to dive into writing.
Fantastic. So where can people find you and your books and courses online?
I'm at robinfinn.com online. I'm at Robin Finn Author on Instagram. At my website, robinfinn.com, I post all my events. I do online workshops. I do one evening events. I really encourage people to come and write and share together. You'll be amazed at how inspired you will get. And the book's available everywhere. You can go to my website and see, but it's basically available everywhere that you buy books.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your time, Robin. That was great.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to talk to you.
So I hope you found that episode with Robin interesting and that it might help you release some of the fears and limiting beliefs that are holding you back and help you double down on being human in your writing and connection with others. As ever, I love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, or message me on X at thecreativepenn, or email me, joanna@thecreativepenn.com. Send me pictures of where you're listening. Next Monday, we are moving away from writing craft as I have a discussion with publishing consultant Thad McElroy about AI in publishing. And Thad focuses mainly on traditional publishing and has some great insights. And we get into lots of things that we are both enthusiastic about. And we have some thoughts on the difficulties as well. So that is coming up next week. In the meantime, happy writing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You can find the backlist episodes and show notes at thecreativepenn.com/podcast. And you can get your free author blueprint at thecreativepenn.com/blueprint. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on Facebook and X at thecreativepenn, or on Instagram and Facebook at JFPennAuthor. Happy writing, and I'll see you next time.